My journey is long and detailed, and I'll try to skip it and just get through the high points. But I graduated from here in 2011. I went through the magazine program here. Was editor of the DM. Also did some video stuff at Newswatch. Was very passionate about news, but I felt like I was more drawn to the magazine industry. I liked the process of it. I liked putting together stories and books and everything in packages. And so I did the stereotypical thing, and I moved to New York, and I was like, bye, Mississippi, see you later. And I was there for about a minute before I got really homesick. But I was there for about a year. I worked for Parade magazine. It was great, but it was one of those life lessons and experiences that shows you what you don't want. I knew that it just really wasn't my thing, and I knew I wanted to get back down south. So a man named David McGee, and his name is important because he's kind of been the thread that ties all of this together. He had been working in New York. He got a job from Oxford originally. He had gotten a job at the Clarion Ledger. And while I was talking to people while I was in New York about going back to the South, they're like, well, where would you work? And I'm like, anywhere but the Clarion Ledger. That was the only, no, not going there. And it wasn't anything evil against them. I didn't think I would like Jackson. I didn't really know if I wanted to work for Gannett or any kind of big corporation like that. So David McGee had just been hired as a digital managing editor there, and my resume ended up on his desk. And he called me every day for about 2 weeks, and I wouldn't answer. He emailed me, and he's like, I just want to talk to you. And me knowing everything at 24, I was like, finally one day I just emailed him like, look, I don't want to waste your time. Very nice and very flattered. I'm never going to live in Jackson. I'm never going to work for Ledger. And he said, I'm not leaving my office today until I talk to you on the phone. I'm like, whatever, dude, let's just do it and be done with it. I called him, and an hour later I was booking a flight to Jackson because he had hired me as the Ledger's social media coordinator. And my dad was thrilled because his baby was coming home. So I spent 2 years there, obviously very different from magazines. Ended up at Birmingham, or at AL.com in Birmingham, it's a digital only outlet that produces newspapers, but it was entirely statewide. I worked in SEC football there, did a lot of SEC football coverage. Sports was not really a goal of mine. When I set out, I just always loved it, and I lived in Alabama, and I was like, why not? I had a lot of opportunities there to do fun stuff digitally, do lots of different innovative things with our audience, create different video packages and profiles and sub-brands. And so that was really my first kind of experience with running part of a digital organization, which I loved. And after that, I went and worked for an SEC football startup. There's been lots gone. And then, so I guess it was, last July, I got a call from David McGee. Mind you, he was also my boss at AL.com. So it kind of followed him around. He goes, all right, I'm going to be the publisher of the Oxford Eagle, and I need you to come and be the editor. And I'm like, nope, sorry, I'm living in Florida. I've only been here 5 minutes. I love Oxford, love it dearly. I can't. It's just, I have a kid. This is not convenient for me. I love you, you're great. Bye. So 2 hours after that call, I was looking for apartments in Oxford. David's very persuasive. But the idea was, because I think a lot of people were shocked. I don't know if shocked is the right word. They thought it was an interesting move. Because I think a lot of people just thought I would come here and work for the paper, and that would be, I don't know, I guess the extent of it. But the idea was to really turn the Eagle into this multimedia company, Oxford News Media, and to innovate community journalism in Mississippi. The goal was to get here and to think about how we cover our communities. And it's no secret that even the largest newspapers with all the resources in the world, they have small staffs. Well, yeah, at the Eagle we have a small staff. So going in and kind of changing the mindset to how can we cover this community with what we've got without feeling like it's this overwhelming assignment every day. So came and did that. We launched Oxford Magazine. It was kind of like a lot going on at once, but to me and really to both of us, Oxford is the perfect place to kind of start an experimental media company based on a brand that is the oldest news brand in Oxford. In the middle of all that, there have been life changes. I became a mom. He's 4 and crazy, and says roll tide a lot, so I don't like it. And so I know that it sounds very scattered. I promise there's a lot more direction and purpose than it sounds. I will say I never went looking for different jobs. It wasn't like I would be somewhere for a year and a half and get bored in this industry. And for those of you going into journalism, you know it's all about who you know. And you'll have a lot of job offers come your way or just interest, but you kind of know when you get one in front of you that you need to jump on. I hope I'm not spending the rest of my life moving around every year and a half. I really don't think I will at this point, but it's just been a pretty quick few years.
So the first question I'll ask is, and you kind of, are talking before, what decisions would you wish you had made as a student here to kind of maybe prepare you more for where you are now, or just looking back, hindsight, classes you wish you had taken, opportunities as a student you wish you had taken, that kind of thing?
Well, I'm not sucking up, but I did say right before this, I wish I would have been able to take gender studies courses. I wish I would have taken a lot of things that were outside of journalism. Looking back, and I don't even want to say this, I don't want to say it as a knock to the journalism school because it's wonderful and it's exploded, but based on what I do primarily, which is digital journalism, I probably would have majored in computer science and minored in a few things. But I think, you could always look back and say, oh, I wish I had done that differently. It's just an odd thing to look back at a version of yourself when you're in your early 20s. And either you think you know everything or you think you're supposed to know everything. And more than anything, I just wish I could have calmed down a little bit and slowed down. I think a lot of us felt that way. We had to write for everything, we had to do everything. And just stopping and listening more and stopping and really thinking about why we're in journalism. A lot of people, they get into journalism because they want to be national reporters or they want to be producers. You don't hear a lot of people say, especially this generation, I want to get into it so I can work in a small community for community journalism, but that's the most critical and the most essential journalism right now. And I think, tailoring the idea of maybe what I wanted to do more, because it was driven by a desire to want to help people or to shed light on things that were obviously covered up, and the South's a pretty good place to do that. So, but it's really easy to say, I wish I was smart when I was 22. So, but I do know if I could do it all over, I would definitely take some more classes just to be more aware of things in general.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you finished the master's in a year? Do you remember that?
Yeah, so it was, which back then it wasn't. I don't know what it is now, but not that it was easy, but it was just one of those things. I went to grad school for two reasons. I do want to teach one day, and that hasn't changed. But when, it was a time, like I got my undergrad in 2010. I don't know how the program is now, so this isn't really a comparison. But back then it was truly you chose print or broadcast. There was no discussion of digital. There was no discussion of maybe both. So I was very much taking newspaper classes and magazine classes. But I knew where the industry was going. We all did, and we were all so scared we wouldn't get jobs. I wanted an extra year to learn digital, and I knew I had to. And it wasn't just digital production, it was analytics. It was understanding how to develop a content strategy, understanding how to cover communities based on their digital penetration in terms of the access that people have to that, and really looking at your coverage that way. So I'm glad I did it. It was it wasn't easy at all, but just hanging around for another year was able to give me the experience I think I needed to give me more of a leg up when I got out.
So I'll move on to really your life in sports. For those that don't know, sports journalism, sports coverage is still almost exclusively male. And most of the women who do work in sports journalism are covering women's sports. I think one thing I saw about a year ago was that almost 90% of sports writers are men, kind of thing. So you talk about some of your experiences, sometimes behind the scenes in sports, but also sometimes actually writing and commenting on traditional men's sports.
Yeah, I don't think it's any secret that it's been a male-dominated field, And everybody always brings up Erin Andrews or Samantha Ponder, and you have so many incredible women working in sports. But there's, I think one of the things that has definitely challenged a lot of women I know who are working in the industry over the last 10 years is this idea that if you are attractive in covering this, then you want to be on camera. And when I say attractive, I mean like conventionally, like Erin Andrews, if that's what they want to do. And I guess if you're not considered that you're the writer or somebody who hides and and doesn't really have a voice. I mean, like I said, sports is very personal to me. It was a family thing. But when I got into it, and especially, I was covering games, but more than that, I was telling stories behind it. Like, I wanted to know why this guy, and this is a real guy, he shows up at Bryant-Denny Stadium every year before a day or whatever it is where they run across the field and say the signs or stuff. He shows up 4 days early with a table and DVDs and this like Roll Tide zombie that brings him good luck. And I wanted to know why. And it wasn't just, hey, look at this guy. It was truly like, what compels you to come here? You have a wife, you have a kid, you have a job. And being in Alabama, you get a lot of opportunities to meet people like that. But it's like any other type of journalism. It's just a different lens because those stories really are everywhere. And so it's a little easier, from my experience anyway, when you're kind of writing those kinds of stories and you're not exactly on the front lines of it. But I have a lot of, and I say this, it's nothing new, so I don't want to say it like it's something profound. When you're a woman working in any facet of sports, there's always going to be heightened pressure because you've got to be on your game all the time. And I was talking to someone earlier, it was over a tweet that I got mad at, which is a shocking thing, but the other night someone said, women aren't bred to understand sports like men are. I'm like, first of all, I'm not bred, but okay. But just that idea, and I know it sounds so insane, but you're realizing like you're going up against that mentality that sports is this hard thing to understand and that women doing it have to try extra hard to make sure they get it. That is a myth. It is like anything else you've studied. Because you cannot tell me in a world with brilliant women who are doctors and scientists and engineers that our brains are not equipped to figure out where that ball is and where it's going to be. It's just not. You watch the game for years and years and years and you pick up nuance and you pick up subtlety and you ask questions that you don't know. But so many of us, and you think about it, I have a friend right here who was in sports for a while, you're always dealing with that assumption, both from readers and even from coaches. Coaches who will dumb down their answers to you when you ask them about routes where they call you a female. And try to over-explain it where you're asking about like specific defensive formations. It's, you're battling with people who I think are very consciously sexist, and then you're just battling a natural assumption. I mean, especially a lot of us who work, this is any facet of journalism. I don't want to hate on sports writers, but there are a lot of just uninformed is the nice word, sports writers out there. Like, you can have a blog and get credentialed for anything, who ask the worst questions at press conferences. And they always start with talk about. You talk about, blah, 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 and it's just terrible. But you notice a coach, and not saying every coach, but you'll see coaches not even knowing this guy. He could be a new reporter, not knowing if he knows a thing about the game. He will talk to him like he does. And I think we all kind of understand that that's an expectation. And when I got into it, I was not preparing to be apologetic or to kind of do the whole, oh, look, I'm a woman covering sports. It's stories, it's normal. And the worst I've ever dealt with is online bullying. Just if you're on Twitter and you're a woman, God help you, because you have boobs and we gotta talk about them all the time. Whether they're loved or hated. And so that's the most I've dealt with is just trolls who stay anonymous. And they're not even necessarily mad about your coverage. They're mad you exist. They're mad you have an opinion. They're mad that you went to the school that is the rival school of where they went to school. And that kind of mentality isn't fun. But I think it's definitely a different type of journalism for women. Definitely a different experience.
So to follow up on that, I know you kind of talked about the harassment a little bit, but in connections to sports, but I personally, and if you feel comfortable talking about some of the other harassment you face from taking positions kind of as the editor and kind of the direction the newspaper is going in stories that let's say, the old guard are not comfortable with in Mississippi, and
Yeah.
kind of thing. So I know you had some issues with talking about what feminism actually is, and the flag and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, so I really wasn't used to that. That started back in college. The year I was GM editor was the year that the students decided to develop a new mascot, which meant it was 2010. Colonel Reb hadn't been on the field in years, but this was the definitive, like, we're ready to vote thing. And of course, you had people from the Colonel Reb Foundation come out of the woodwork, and just people in general who wanted Colonel Reb back, writing letters. And at that point, even though I'd been editor for most of the year, I really hadn't felt comfortable enough establishing a voice beyond our daily editorials. There were things I wanted to say, but I was insecure, and I thought my arguments aren't strong enough. If I put this out there and it's not airtight, then it'll come after me. It was just, I was young, I was fearful. And one day I just had it. I was so fed up because I was tired of getting calls from 40-year-old men telling me that I need to write favorable things about Colonel Reb. And so I wrote an editorial that was essentially like, F off, you're not a student, we're gonna vote. It didn't say that. That would have been crass. Well, looking back on it now, I kind of wish it would have. And I didn't think it was a big deal in terms of, like, I was happy I wrote it. It was just an argument saying, however this vote goes, let the students decide, and stop interrupting the process, stop interrupting kind of what this university is trying to do. The next day, I laugh about it now, at the time it was terrifying. The next day I was leaving class, and the column had been online for about a day at this point. And my cell phone, because I was smart, I had it publicly listed on Facebook. And I don't think I ever thought about that. That wasn't like I just probably had it on there from when I was younger and didn't think anyone would go looking for it. And I got a call from a guy who claimed to be like the Grand Super Cyclops or whatever from the Klan, saying, I know where you work. And he named the Bishop Hall. And if you do this again, we will show up. And at the time, that was the scariest thing I'd ever experienced. Now it's only like the fifth scariest thing. But back then, I mean, that was the first time I'd gotten really shaken, because it just seemed so bizarre to me. Really, I'm like a 21-year-old girl. I have an opinion about students getting to vote on a mascot. It just seemed a little extreme. But that was kind of my first introduction into how people's passions about these divisive issues could invade the lives of journalists and people who dare to speak about it. So that was an interesting year, but when one thing I didn't count on, I don't know why, I guess I was being naive, when I got back to Oxford, was for all of this to be revisited in a way. I knew that the state flag had already been taken down. I obviously knew there was some resistance to that. And I'm telling you, I started work on a Monday, and that Friday was when Ross Bjork announced that the band would not play any version of Dixie. And I just kind of laughed about it. I'm like, really? We're still here? I was covering this 8 years ago. And then as it progressed, the state flag, and so some people, I'd written a lot about it. By this point, I'd lived some life. I was a mom, I wasn't scared of anything. And I just wrote some columns about flags, about statues, about things that we need to directly wrestle with and talk about, rather than acting like it's not there and saying, well, everyone is entitled to their opinion. We just all need to be quiet and let things be the way they are, and I don't agree with that. There was a man named Matt Reardon who had aligned himself with the school state, what is it called, State Flag Foundation?
Yeah, something like that.
And even though he didn't attend here, and if you don't know who that is, he's the person who was out on the square not too long ago, strapped with rifle and pistol. He's come in the newsroom a few times strapped with his rifle. Just very adamant that not taking down the statue, I'm here to protect the flag. If you don't know who he is, just look him up and you'll learn all about him. And I became his target. I was an easy target for him for some reason, and so he started harassing me online. He would send me these threatening Facebook messages. He would tweet at me 60, 70 times a day, which, I don't care, I'll mute you. But after a while, it's like, okay, what's wrong with this dude? Something's wrong. Why are you focused on me all day long? And it got a little scary, and I got an attorney. We did a cyber stalking case against him and basically did a cease and desist, and I had him blocked and everything, so I don't know if he ever went away. But he was bound, determined to disrupt. This wasn't just, hey, I disagree with you, let's talk about it. This was the fact that you share your opinion enrages me. The fact that you get to have a platform makes me mad, and I'm gonna let you know it. And it was just unacceptable, scary behavior. And mind you, I'm not connecting that to what I'm about to tell you. These are just two things that kind of came together. So about a month ago, which I don't know who's on Twitter in here, but I tweet pretty often. And one of the things I've tweeted probably for about 2 years now, my son's just very sassy, and he says very sassy things to me. Mean, really. And he's just the world's biggest troll. And so over time, they were called 3-year-old tweets. It was 3-0. I never tweeted his name. And it was just stuff he'd say to me, like I'd tell him, don't eat cookies in bed, and he'd say, well, I'm eating them in my mouth. And just things like that. And it became, the tweets, there's like a whole subsect on Twitter, mom Twitter. It's really awesome because it's like all the Pinterest moms are over there being perfect, and then all the real moms are on Twitter talking about, this is really hard, give me some wine. So this was not a new thing I had done. I'd done it since he was little. A few things on BuzzFeed and HuffPo had done about it, and people knew. And anytime I would say anything, kind of like the wine or anything like that, people knew it was a joke. Anybody who's talked to me for 5 minutes, or 5 seconds maybe, knows how much I love my kid. So one night, it was about 6 weeks ago, I was struggling with some potty training stuff, and Jack, sweet little Jack, I was trying to get him to go potty, and he wouldn't do it. I promise this has a point. And finally he yells at me, there is nothing coming out of my penis. And so I tweet it, and then I immediately follow up with 3-year-old for sale, $12 or best offer. Ha ha ha. Like I had 10 responses of people like, oh, he's worth at least 15. Clearly this is a joke, we're all laughing. If I were to sell my son, I'd sell him for more than $12, and I probably wouldn't sell him on, Twitter. So a week after that tweet, I'm at work, and I'm meeting one of my staffers, and one of the women who works at the front desk said, there are 2 women here to see you. And I get a lot of people who come in unannounced, they might want to talk about something in paper or whatever, so I'm like, okay, so I go up there, they're looking at me like they're about to tell me someone's died. There's nothing that even suggests they're happy to see me. And so I'm a little confused, a little nervous, bring them back to my office, they shut the door and they're like, we can't tell you much right now, but we're with Child Protective Services. You're at the center of a human trafficking investigation. And I thought it was a joke, and then I started shaking, and I'm like, what are you talking about? There's a sheriff's deputy outside. We didn't want to cause a scene. You need to go get your son right now and bring him here. We need to see him. And at this point, I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking. Obviously, I'm nervous, scared, but for some reason in my crazy head, the first thing that seemed appropriate to say was, do you realize those tweets have been on BuzzFeed? Like, it was insane. It was about a tweet you had sent. And I didn't know what the tweet was yet. It was a joke. I go get my son and bring him over. Of course, he's mad because he was woken up during a nap. And the whole scene was just terrible. And these people are talking to me like, you need to be careful what you tweet. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, it was just unbelievable. There was no need to have a sheriff's deputy there, but he was there regardless. Luckily, I had a good attorney who was able to kind of call a boss's boss and get it shut down. Because they were ready to inspect my home. They wanted to come in that night. They wanted to do forensic exams. They wanted a drug test. They wanted to completely invade my life because somebody had called a number, didn't leave his real name, which they protect anonymity, but usually they ask for the name so they can further get more information. All they would say was a man who called and said she's mentally ill and she hates her child, and obviously she's trying to sell him on Twitter, and they ran with it. And for a week I was a zombie because, even when you know how ridiculous that stuff is, they had the power to take my kid. They could have. If they decided that there was reason to do it, if they really thought I was a threat to his safety. And so it was that, I can deal with people calling me out all day long, and God knows they do. But that was the first run-in that I really had where somebody in my family was affected. And it completely, I kind of went radio silent for a while. Not too long, just about a few days, just because I needed to kind of get through this. And I decided, I didn't want to say anything more about him. And I'm not going to hide the fact that I'm a mom, but I made sure everything was on lockdown, just because I never thought in a million years that some innocent joke about my kid would be used against me. And clearly, it was by somebody who had it out for me and who knew that I was a target. And that, I've always said I've been very lucky. There's so many women in this business who are harassed endlessly and who deal with physical stalkers, and I haven't really had to deal with much of that, but this has been probably the scariest run-in I've had thus far, and just the most infuriating one, because who the hell are you? What gives you, what in your mind tells you, you know what, I don't like her opinion about that statue. Let me call Child Protective Services, because that's obviously a reasonable response, but you never know what you're dealing with.
So I'm going to ask one more. This isn't quite journalism, but it's kind of fits with the class. I think both of us are very committed to the First Amendment, free speech, and that kind of thing. And so I would say, I'm not going to say briefly, but how do you balance? How do you get through the day with situations like that? Your love for the First Amendment and seeing people who are exploiting it to harm other people.
I think from my perspective in journalism, I'm always thinking about kind of the stories we're trying to tell for other people. I mean, that was the thing that was infuriating about the whole thing. I had access to an attorney. I knew my rights. Do you know how many people, how many children in the state need that agency? How many parents don't have those resources? And I think it's easier when I'm at work, because I think we use this to empower other people. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't need to talk about my kids. I don't need to talk about my love-hate relationship with almost football, but I do. And so to me, it's frivolous that way. I don't feel like anyone has stifled me. I feel like it's a conscious decision that if I'm going to willingly be in this industry and I'm going to be this exposed, I've got to protect my family. I've got to protect people I love from that. But at the same time, I mean, when it comes to work, when it comes to anything we talk about, I'm a firm believer that we've got to give a voice to the voiceless, which should be the point. Because I'm the luckiest person on earth. I've never really struggled. Okay, some people on Twitter came after me. But even then, there's always been a way out of it. There are too many people in this world, in this town, in this university, who are not part of this idyllic Oxford, where everybody's rich and everybody's happy. Those people need a voice. And to me, that's the most important thing that we do.
I think at this point we're going to open it up, and first I want to give the opportunity for my students, if any of them have a question that they would like to ask. We'll do that first, and then open it up to the room itself. So, does any of mine have a question or comment?
Sorry, for my sister.
Okay, then, do we have any questions? I saw one in the back. Yeah.
You were talking about people's passion for advice conditions online. However, how does criticism for that vary for women? Because the same notion would be that if you're talking about device additions, you will get criticism. But would you say that the difference for female and female presenting persons is people are criticizing their ability to have an opinion at all rather than the content itself? And I know even online, just random things, I'll get rape threats, and it seems it's insane. And I think a lot of men and other people sometimes don't understand. Yes, you're talking about stuff that may be critical things, but using things like rape threats just seems like a direct power move to want to put down someone who's trying to subvert norms,
Yeah, absolutely. I always say, kind of in jest, but it's not really a funny joke, that when a male journalist or commentator gets criticized, he's called stupid, or maybe some other kind of vague insult. When a woman is wronged by the same crowd that would do that, she's ugly, she is a whore, just for the fact that she exists. The fact that rape threats are a norm, and I don't say that to act like it's a nonchalant thing, but when you get used to seeing it that often, and on one hand, and I don't mean to belittle this, but on one hand it can be empowering because you realize they have no weapon to call out your argument. You know, I've had people who email me like, if they aren't already, your parents should be ashamed of you. And I'm like, well, they're not. So thank you. But it's a lot of look stuff. I mean, Jesus, if I had, you know, $1 for every time someone called me fat or, you know, said something about the fact that I'm a single mom, as if it has anything to do with my opinion on whether a flag needs to fly. Like, yeah, it's different. And a lot of my friends go through the same thing. And I don't think that's exaggerated. I don't think it's a secret. But it just kind of, again, shows the mentality. And I should mention, and most of that type of criticism does come from men. Not that you don't have women sometimes who will make similar insults if they just vehemently disagree. But it's not a lie. I mean, it's true. And it's a very real problem. And when you're using a medium where you could be anonymous and, you know, just put a photo up and a fake name, and you get to destroy it. I mean, I won't name names. If you know the situation, you'll know who it is. There is a high school football coach teaching in this state right now who makes it a pastime to come after me and tell me how fat I am. One day I tweeted something about, being, I forget, it was like a Beyonce thing, I don't know. It was like funny. It was something about being curvy or like embrace your curves. He tweeted out, and he's a high school coach who hides behind a fake name. It's like, I'm so glad that you've given up and accepted that you're going to be fat forever. And it's like, dude, you are an employee. You're supposed to shape young minds. I mean, that's how he's been for 3 years. And so, yeah, I would say there's definitely a noticeable difference.
I have like 5 questions.
Yeah.
One is the Jamel Hill thing, whatever you have to say about that. The other is when you said about the word fat and reply to women, do you think that that's escalated because of the example of our fearless leader, national leader, who does denigrate women? That's made any difference? And another one. Oh, and then aren't there some things Facebook and Twitter could do to change this constant harassment and threatening of women, which is the trolling? I'm so shocked by it. I am every time I hear about it, and I've heard in podcasts that there are things you can do. So that's Jamel, Trump, and
So I know Jamel, she's incredible. She's a wonderful, talented woman. Something I thought was really interesting, and I think it's a good point. She came out, I guess it was this weekend, and said she deserved to be suspended. And a lot of people were kind of shocked by that. And but the point she made, I thought was so professional, even if it's a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, when you're a student journalist and you don't really have a boss, you just kind of get to do whatever. And if you mess up, it's like, oh, I hope I don't get sued. You know, I mean, you don't really have any consequences. When you go out in the world, you still have the same kind of hopeful view of the world. But you're working for companies, you're working for bosses, and they have policies. And the decision you usually have to make when you go to work for them, and I've been lucky, I've worked for a few good companies, you have to decide, is it worth that? Because if policies are policies, and they've got liability and they've got to protect themselves. And that's kind of the take she took on it. However, obviously, as someone who keeps up with it and keeps up with sports, and a lot of people who contribute to either ESPN or anything else, it's just, I don't know, I realize everybody has their different sports people they like, but the fact that Clay Travis can say literally anything, and it's just, oh, that kooky Clay Travis, or, you know, anything like that. And I realize we're talking about different companies here, but for Jamel to have expressed her opinion, while I totally understand if it goes against company policy, it has to be punished, I think piling on to that by other people saying, oh, she's so out of line, kind of similar to the conversations we're having about the anthem. Can you believe these people would disrespect our country and our flag without even considering for a second why they're doing what they're doing? That's kind of hard to watch. I mean, Jamel, she takes care of herself and she knows that, and she is trying to keep her job. I mean, everybody wants to stay employed. But I do think there's also the other side of it you always fight, which is there's a company policy, even if you weren't in journalism or anything else. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out with her over the next few months, though, because I think just my personal feeling, I think she's going to be a lot more empowered. in the future, just because she is so talented, and I think they realize she's a voice of reason. Trump. Whew. We don't have enough time. I do think, you know, obviously one of the concerns as a woman, and it's funny because a lot of people accuse me of being a raging liberal, all based on the fact that I just think people should be treated like people. I don't share political opinions, but also I don't think human rights are a political opinion. When I talk about political opinions, I'm talking about the economy, I'm talking about foreign relations. So yeah, as a woman, when you see a man like that who is glorified, who can call women fat pigs, who can make period jokes, who can grab women by the genitals, and who can sit, like, the moment for me, and I don't mean to rant, but I was talking to my mother about this the other day. Love or hate Hillary. To be a woman and watch the debate when her husband's four alleged, I guess, whatever you want to call them, victims, but they were also called something else, to sit in front of her as a tactic. She didn't do that. She was completely vilified for the fact that her husband cheated on her, and was expected to keep her composure, which she did, while this other candidate was allowed to parade around and say whatever he wanted to about women, and anyone who got mad about it, they were told to lighten up. And I don't think I need to expand on that. I think it's probably pretty clear, but I do think people feel, not just with that, but with a lot of behavior, they feel empowered. They feel like they have a representative who says, hey, it's okay to bully. It's okay, because we got to make things great again, and sometimes people have to get hurt. You know, it's really not about, everybody talks about being offended. Oh, if people are so easily offended. It's not about being offended. It's not. It's about what's appropriate behavior. Because I am a lucky, blessed person, like I told you, I've never been oppressed in my life. I don't know how it feels. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a black woman and to look at the state flag and to see a symbol of oppression. I don't know, but I don't have to know to know it's wrong. I'm not personally offended by it. I'm offended by the mentality that keeping it as some sort of statement about tradition and history when we know the history, when it's not debatable. And kind of forgot where I was going with that. I kind of went on right there. I'm sorry, but you know, when you can control the messages, oh, everyone's just so sensitive these days. It has nothing to do with being sensitive. It has to do with human decency. Human decency. Like, you want to call me fat? Fine. Join everyone else my entire life. Really, like, do not care. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean you're not a garbage person for doing it. So, what was after Trump? There's a lot. Jamal Trump and...
So, Facebook's policies
about this. Facebook is a little better than Twitter. Twitter has been kind of the big one you hear about, just because a lot of us, anybody who's harassed, you don't have to work in journalism, it's really easy to go through the process of trying to suspend someone or get an account blocked. Very easy. They'd make it easy, but that doesn't mean it happens. It's just the process. And you can take a tweet of someone calling you a fat whore and say, hey, that's not cool, Twitter, please do something about it. And more often than not, you get a response back that says, this does not violate our terms of service. And that's not an isolated incident. That's a lot of years and years and years of people saying, like, you gotta do something about it. You can't just let this run rampant. You see it some on Facebook, but Twitter has just been the Wild West. It's kind of been insane. And I think when you look at what happened last week or 2 weeks ago, my days running together with Rose McGowan, and shutting down her account because it had the phone number in it. Not to say that I disagree with that, but just that the company was so quick to respond to it. And this violates our terms, and we had to take it down because of that. It's like, I'm sorry, you let people get harassed here every day. You have multiple people calling them out, showing you the evidence, screenshots, everything, showing you, hey, that person is harassing that person. You're not doing a thing about it. You know, of course, it's not as easy. It's not like they're like little Twitter elves who just sit around looking at it all day. They have to have the infrastructure, and they have to have strategy to handle that. And I think they will, but I think for it to come in 2017, 10 years after Twitter launched, and especially when, this is a personal opinion, I don't have stats to back it up, when I feel like there's more harassment and open hate among people than I've ever seen. I just hope that they get the message right when they do that as well.
regarding like the First Amendment and like the things people have said to you, how do you draw the line between free speech and hate speech? And like, do you differentiate the two? And do you think that like laws should be made to sort of prevent like those casual hate threats or like even rape threats? Or like, how do you think people should be best held accountable for what they say online, I guess?
Well, you know, I don't want to say it's easy to make laws, but even Mississippi has a great, well, it's decent cyberbullying law in the books, and it basically says if you are harassing someone online and they have told you to stop and you don't stop, you're breaking the law. Enforcement is where it comes in. I mean, obviously, there is a difference, a huge difference in hate speech and freedom of speech, and we could spend hours talking about that. But one thing that I think, especially on something like Twitter, where you have a lot of personal interactions that a lot of people never see necessarily unless they go looking for it, man, nobody has time to die on all those hills. Like if you focused on every bit of harassment, you would waste your entire day. And so I think that's one part of it. But it's going to take more than just cyberbullying laws in the books. It's going to take, like we were just talking about with Twitter, because oftentimes, I mean, even when I've had my attorney go after people like Matt, you still have to enforce it. You've got to find them, and it's usually a matter of resources and the time to do it, which is not an answer or a justification. It's just one of those really frustrating things about social media and online discussion in this really volatile age. I didn't really answer your question, but I guess my point was there are laws in many states and there are regulations in some, but policing the hate that runs rampant on the internet, I wouldn't want to do it. I mean, until they can figure out a way to do it effectively to where people are actually going to be protected.
Any other questions?
Curiously, who do you think does a better job of policing these social media sites? I mean,
Between the sites you mean, like Facebook or Twitter?
Twitter.
I don't spend a lot of time interacting on Facebook. I use it a lot for work, or I'll use it to share things, and so it's hard to say, but I have found that I've had more success when there have been people who come on my timeline or anything like that. I can usually get them blocked or temporarily removed. I've just heard more in general because they can directly see things. They can directly filter the language a lot of times. I mean, you see all the time, they obviously, again, they don't have an entire staff dedicated to reading everything, so they have these filters that a lot of times fail. And you'll see, I even see it just managing our brand social accounts where they'll filter out something they think is a curse word or a threat, and it's actually just like a really enthusiastic Ole Miss fan, or something like that. And so they depend a lot on that vetting. It's just the nature of Facebook and the way that works, where it's a lot of threads and discussions that people can openly see. Not that you can on Twitter, but you do have to go digging for it. I think that it makes it easier for Facebook to do that, but I also hear of a lot of failed things on Facebook. I mean, to this day, as far as I know, and I've had a lot of friends, Matt Reardon was never, ever at any point when he was attacking me openly, whatever, shut down. Ever. And he wasn't suspended, his account wasn't, never. And there were screenshots. I had maybe 40 or 50 people, I didn't ask them, but they were trying to work together to get this guy handled, and he's still babbling about something. So it's like, I don't know. I do think Facebook is a little easier to police, though. Twitter is, but you also, and I don't mean it, I'm sorry, Michael. Facebook, you don't get the same luxury. I mean, you can if you go to the effort, but Twitter, all you need, email address, photo of something you like, and a name, and you're done. Whereas Facebook, you kind of have to have a public profile, or you have to be willing to sit there and make a totally fake account to go after someone. It's just really easy to do it on Twitter.
I would just add to that with Facebook, you can delete people's comments. So like if they post on your page or they post a comment or something, you can delete it where you can't delete their tweet, kind of thing. So
yeah.
That gives you a little bit more control on Facebook from that. So I think we're pretty much out of time for my class. I know Alex has to leave fairly soon, but she might stay around for a question or two. But if we can give her a round of applause.